on First at 9 this Saturday, the 31st of January 2026. Teaching recruitments. Government reveals plans to recruit over 23,000 graduate teachers this year. Probe underway to identify errors in learning modules introduced under the new education reforms, says Minister. Better lives. Minister of Agriculture pledges to compensate, resettle and improve the livelihoods of residents living in reservoir reservations. Neighbourhood first. India dispatches 10 Bailey bridges to Colombo to assist the restoration of critical connectivity. Administrative shakeup. Chairman of Airport and Aviation Services dismissed from position due to administrative changes. Clarifies Minister of Ports and Civil Aviation.
Kalin baby so rupial 90කට. Kalin baby podi හැමෝටමයි.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on Derana News Channel, Sri Lanka's most trusted news source. I'm Derana joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. We begin with your top story. Minister of Ports and Civil Aviation Aruna Karunatilaka says plans are underway to recruit over 23,000 graduate teachers this year and provide high-speed internet facilities to more than 1,800 schools. Speaking at a recent gathering in Mathura, the minister added that investigations are currently being conducted into errors found in learning modules introduced under the new education reforms. However, several education unions raised concerns regarding the Grade 1 English module, insisting that responsible officials should be held accountable.
The Mathura District Conference, organised by the National Movement for Education Reforms, was held yesterday in Nupe, Mathura.
Under this program, the GCE, ordinary level and advanced level examinations will not be cancelled. We have decided to recruit 23,334 graduate teachers this year. Plans are also underway to provide high-speed internet connections to 1,873 schools with a grant of 5,000 rupees allocated to each school to cover internet facilities. If there are criticisms regarding these modules, including spelling or printing errors, investigations are currently being conducted.
Meanwhile, several education trade unions continue to voice concerns over the newly introduced modules, including those for Grade 1.
Deputy Director General of the National Institute of Education, Darshana Samaraveera, was immediately set on compulsory leave. The modules from Grade 1 to Grade 5 were under his supervision as the final authority. Has he done this job, he must take responsibility for the errors found in the Grade 1 English module. Activity books were recently distributed to Grade 1 classes. However, these books were not provided during teachers' training program and teachers did not have sufficient opportunity to revise them beforehand. It is uncertain what additional errors may be discovered in the future. If authorities treat these issues as conspiracies and repeatedly involve the CID, the Education Secretary will have little time for anything else. Unlike the Grade 6 English module, there will be no opportunity to remove pages from this module as it has already been distributed to approximately 300,000 students.
Meanwhile, the hunger strike initiated by the School Development Officers Association in front of the Presidential Secretariat entered its 6th day today, with all 4 original participants hospitalized due to worsening health. However, 2 more protesters entered the hunger strike this morning. Director General of Public Relations at the Presidential Secretariat, D. Gamage, who visited the protest site yesterday afternoon, stated that the President is prepared to hold discussions with the development officers at 6 p.m. on February 2nd. However, the protesters insist that the meeting with the President should take place before the proposed date. Meanwhile, Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met with the protesters today.
This government has been consistently dishonest. This is yet another promise it has failed to fulfill. We would like to inform the government that further discussion will not be productive. We request that these teachers be recruited into Grade 2 of the teachers' service immediately. After they complete the postgraduate diploma, we urge the authorities to provide a solution for confirming the appointments of the development officers.
ඔබේ සම හඳුනාගෙන ඖෂධීය ශාකසාරමය forever face wash එකක් භාවිතා කරන්න.
Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya vows that the government will continue to move forward with resolve even in the face of strong criticism. Addressing an event this morning, the Prime Minister reiterated the need to cultivate strong and capable human resources in order to compete and thrive in an evolving world.
Sisunana Pranama, a scholarship awarding ceremony organised by the Education Cooperative Society, was held this morning at Temple Trees under the patronage of Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasooriya.
Former Minister of Cooperative and Internal Trade, Johnston Fernando, inflicted significant damage upon this union. I saw that the former minister, along with his two sons, have once again been remanded. Many have voiced concerns that despite this government assuming office with a firm commitment to hold wrongdoers accountable, certain culprits are still at large. However, little attention is being paid to those who are already facing legal consequences. Several individuals, including Johnston Fernando, Pillan, a minister representing the North Central Province, Mahindananda Alutgamage and Nalin Fernando have been placed under remand custody. Those responsible for steering the nation into hardship are gradually being brought before the law, while legal proceedings against other offenders are still underway. However, the government will not interfere with the independent course of these legal processes.
At this crucial juncture, the government remains firmly committed to bringing about meaningful and far-reaching transformation within the nation's education sector. The opposition and various other groups have voiced criticism of these reform initiatives. Such responses are not unexpected, as any significant change inevitably encounters resistance. However, when guided by a clear vision and well-defined objectives, we must continue to move forward with resolve even in the face of strong criticism. At present, the global landscape is increasingly complex and unpredictable. Many nations once considered stable are now facing uncertainty, while others have been drawn into severe economic crises. In this context, an island nation such as Sri Lanka, already tested by numerous challenges, must cultivate strong and capable human resources in order to compete and thrive in an evolving world. The education sector stands as the primary pathway to developing such human capital. It is with this purpose that these education reforms have been introduced to ensure a secure, enriched and dignified quality of life for all members of society.
සියලු දෙනාටම ලස්සන ජීවිත හිමි වෙන ඒ සමාජය ඒ රට බිහි කරන්න.
Leader of Sarojana Balaya parliamentarian Dilip Jayawira states that proper education reforms are essential for Sri Lanka and should be implemented with feedback from all stakeholders. He made these remarks while addressing an event in Anuradhapura today.
Letters of appointment were presented to Sarojana Balaya divisional representatives of the Padavi area in Anuradhapura today under the patronage of Sarojana Balaya leader MP Dilip Jayawira. We were calling for modern education reforms for 20 years. Critical reforms are indeed necessary. However, when reforms are implemented in a hurry, errors inevitably appears as seen in the Grade 1 module. Errors are present on almost every page of this book. It is misguided to claim that we are criticizing the modules simply to oppose the government. There are noteworthy inclusions in the withdrawn modules. The Grade 6 entrepreneurship module, for instance, highlights world-famous entrepreneurs. The first is A.T. Ratna. Although he achieved entrepreneurial success, how many people in this country or globally are familiar with him? This is the country that produced the late Upali Vijayawardena. The module also lists Victor Hettigoda, popularly known as Siddhalepaveda Mahathya, as another world-renowned entrepreneur. As the third example, the module named a female entrepreneur named Achala, who even when asked admitted she was unaware of her inclusion. The module then references other internationally recognized figures such as Bill Gates, Warren Buffett and Elon Musk. This government is insane. How many globally influential entrepreneurs has our country truly produced who have made a measurable impact worldwide? Consider the brands that have genuinely changed the world. Children who study this module will gain little understanding of entrepreneurship. We urge authorities to carefully review the modules and assess their content. We support meaningful reforms and are willing to contribute constructive suggestions through a pilot project that gathers feedback from parents, students and educators. We are calling for the reforms to be implemented, not abandoned. Meanwhile, the Sarojana Sen has a program today distributed school supplies to children of families displaced by Cyclone Ditwa. The event was attended by Deputy Leader of Sarojana Balaya S.M. Chandrasena and Vice Chairman Professor Channa Jayasumana.
Minister Bimal Ratnayaka asserts that the Constitutional Council is expected to make its final decision concerning the Auditor General on 3rd February. With that, here's a look at more thoughts shared in the political arena.
Owing to the severe shortage of teachers, school principals were compelled to assign school development officers to teach certain subjects. At that time, these officers carried out teaching duties effectively in accordance with officially assigned timetables. Today, at least 16,000 individuals have been left unemployed. Given that they have served the nation for many years, it is unjust to require them to sit for further examinations as a condition for continued employment. We therefore urge the government to provide a sustainable and just solution to this issue, particularly as those affected have now taken to the streets and commenced hunger strikes, risking their lives in protest. The examination in question will be conducted in the near future. The candidates concerned are graduates who have already rendered service for a considerable period and therefore, in my view, they are fully capable of sitting for this examination. However, it is evident that members of the SJB are further aggravating the situation. They visit the protest site, inquire into the condition of the demonstrators and extend assurance of support, thereby intensifying the issue. It was during Sajid Premadas's tenure as a cabinet minister that the policy decision to recruit through a competitive examination was approved. Accordingly, SJB members should first seek clarification from Premadasa regarding the origins of this decision before directing their attention towards the demonstrators. With regard to the issue involving teachers, assurances were provided previously, even through legal means, that they would be recruited into the teaching service. What appears to have occurred is that when JVP-affiliated trade unions staged protests and refrained from teaching students, certain graduates who had already received their letters of appointment continued to perform teaching duties in schools. This is the mistake they made. Those teachers who continued teaching at that time without inconveniencing students or parents have now taken to the streets in protest. This, in my view, reflects a political agenda. Such actions, however, have severe consequences, contributing to the destabilization of the entire nation. There were no discussion with the Constitutional Council regarding matters related to the Attorney General. However, during yesterday's session of the Constitutional Council, deliberations were held concerning the position of the Auditor General. The President has submitted new nominations for the post. However, Council members require a minimum of 2 days to review and assess these nominations. Accordingly, a final decision on the matter is expected to be reached on February 3rd.
Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, Land and Irrigation K.D. Lalkantha says that individuals residing within reservations of reservoirs will be compensated, resettled and provided with better livelihoods. The minister made these remarks while addressing an event at the Ministry of Agriculture yesterday.
A Cascade Management Committee handbook was launched yesterday as part of the Climate Smart Irrigated Agriculture project funded by the World Bank. The event was presided over by Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, Land and Irrigation, K.D. Lalkantha.
The main issue we face when renovating reservoirs is that people are living within the bounds of the reservation. We have already begun the initial steps to remove such settlements within the reservation of Nuwara. It has now turned into a fight with some protesting against it. I strongly believe that these reservoirs must be free from encroachments. Wars, friendships or political interference cannot stop these measures. We are ready to compensate those who leave their residences and we will ensure they are provided with better livelihoods than before. When the Mahavali project was launched, people left their homes, villages and cities. It did not become an issue because they were given better lives. Recently, several officers approached me after measuring the boundaries of a reservoir near which many people are residing. They asked whether the boundary could be adjusted to prioritize the residents over the reservoir. How does that make sense? I do not believe reservoirs can be protected as long as there are officers with such a mindset. However, the government has taken a firm stance to protect and rehabilitate the country's reservoirs.
Welcome back. As reconstruction efforts continue in the wake of Cyclone Ditwa, India dispatched a consignment of 10 Bailey bridges from Visakhapatnam to Colombo on board INS Gharial to assist the restoration of critical connectivity. Sharing the details in a post on X, India's Minister of External Affairs said the supply of bridges is a part of India's special economic package of $450 million announced during Indian Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jayashankar's visit to Sri Lanka. Operation Sagar Bandhu, launched in November 2025, enabled India to provide urgent humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, including restoration of roads, bridges and essential services. Former Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jainath Kolambage highlights Sri Lanka's geostrategic importance in the Indian Ocean, noting that maritime security, trade routes and resource-rich waters are both assets and vulnerabilities. Speaking on our current affairs program at Hyde Park with Indivari Amuwatta, he stressed the need for balanced relations with major powers and said Sri Lanka should not pose a security threat to India. Also joining the program, diplomatic historian Dr. George Cook added that security goes beyond the military to include economic, environmental and technological factors. Meanwhile, international relations analyst Dr. Harinda Vidanage called for long-term foreign policy planning that supports economic growth while safeguarding Sri Lanka's sovereignty and prosperity.
Seen these changing dynamics of foreign policy, and today the uncertainties need to be addressed as situations arise. So how would you analyze the situation for small countries like Sri Lanka, and how important is it for small countries like Sri Lanka to have a foreign policy geared to address these vulnerabilities?
As I mentioned, this geostrategically important location can be a curse in this new situation that is developing. Now, what if a powerful country say that you have to be with us? If not, there will be consequences. And during my time in the government service, it was never the case. We could talk, we could negotiate, we could discuss. There was no hard and fast rule that we have no choice but to follow the wish of a big country. But right now it has changed. Now this is, I think, a very dangerous predicament for a small country like Sri Lanka. So how do we kind of overcome that? Of course, one is some kind of regionalism. I think we right now need an approach, I like to call it Sri Lanka first, right? We have to have our own interests, our own situation in mind, and work with the long-term strategy, how best we can start repay our loans, how best we can come out of this economic downfall we have had from like 2022. How do we overcome this? I think that should be our main concern right now.
How important is India in this equation?
There is no question that Sri Lanka should benefit from Indian economic development. On the security aspect, India is very worried, very concerned about their security. When you look at India's national security from the ocean, that is maritime, and the air, inevitably Sri Lanka is part of that. If someone come here to be a threat to India, that is going to be a serious consideration. We should not be a concern to them.
How do you think internal political changes within a country like ours affects policies on a global stage, and how do you think we can really settle the difficulties that we faced so far?
The biggest problems in Sri Lanka, not just in Sri Lanka, many small states, is seeing the country next to them or seeing the regional power the way they saw it 10 to 15 years back. Because you have to be time and space conscious when you deal with. So the India we saw 10 years ago, 15 years ago is not the India we are dealing with now. It's the diplomatic sophistication that is required. Sri Lanka also needs to cue in with the sophistication and the complexity that is emerging in our regional and the global environment. Now diplomacy is not just about statecraft, right? There is a geo-economic trend to this. You know, the world is interconnected, interdependent. So diplomacy is not just about doing, statecraft. At that level, it's about business, it's about economics, it's about people to people as well.
To what extent should security considerations shape a country's foreign policy decisions?
Very often we don't realize that security is a massive umbrella. We focus a lot on the military dimension. But of course, we're looking at other aspects now. We're understanding the various definitions of security. Security also relates to food. It also relates to the economy. It also relates to climate. It also relates to the environment. If you look at it from an economic perspective, we want to make sure that the economy is safe. Everyone understanding the wider context of security becomes paramount at this particular stage, because we've been focused, when you use the term national security, the first thing that pops into our mind is making sure that our defense is in place. Yes, absolutely. But defense on all sides, from all potential enemies. Enemies that can come up from within, from outside. It can come in many forms. And this is where understanding security, comprehending the fullness of security becomes very relevant.
With that, here's a look at other local news in brief.
The final rites of the Navy Lieutenant Koyan Chamitha was held yesterday in Gampaha. Lieutenant Chamitha was the first Sri Lankan naval officer to successfully complete the United States Navy SEAL Basic Training Program. He was 28 years old at the time of passing. 8 high-ranking police officers have been transferred with immediate effect, subject to the approval of the National Police Commission. The transfers include 2 Deputy Inspectors General of Police, 5 Senior Superintendents of Police and a Superintendent of Police. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka Railways announced that trains operating on the coastal line between Colombo Fort and Wellavatta may experience delays of about 15 minutes tomorrow due to essential maintenance work to upgrade the signalling system. According to Sri Lanka Railways, the upgrade is aimed at increasing the frequency of train operations on the up and down tracks. In other local news, a 14-year-old girl was allegedly killed by her father with a sharp weapon following a dispute over a mobile phone last night. The deceased has been identified as a resident of Delkanda in Uragas Manghandiya. The victim was admitted to Alpitio Hospital with critical injuries, where she later succumbed to her injuries while receiving treatment. The suspect has been taken into police custody and the remains of the deceased has been placed at the Alpitio Hospital.
Welcome back to First at 9. Minister of Ports and Civil Aviation Aruna Karunatilaka asserts that Chairman of Airport and Aviation Services Sri Lanka, Harsha Abevikrama, was dismissed from his position due to changes made in the administrative structure of the company. Speaking to the media, the minister clarified that there is no connection between the relevant decision and the matter concerning a letter issued to Venerable Banagala Upatissa Thera.
The recent removal of the chairman of Airport and Aviation Services Sri Lanka has drawn considerable public attention. It must be clearly stated that there is no connection between this decision and the matter concerning a letter issued to extend a special permit granting Venerable Banagala Upatissatera access to the airport terminal. In that instance, I personally directed that the authorization letter be issued and Airport and Aviation Services acted in accordance on my instructions. This was an entirely separate matter that took place during the first week of January. Subsequently, the government identified the need to introduce administrative changes across several institutions, including Airport and Aviation Services. Discussions were held in this regard, and on the 21st, I met with the then chairman of Airport and Aviation Services. During that meeting, I informed him of the anticipated administrative changes planned for the institution in the future. Following these discussions, a decision was taken to relieve him of his duties as chairman of Airport and Aviation Services.
The inaugural flight of China's Capital Airlines arrived at Bandaranaike International Airport this afternoon from Beijing Daxing International Airport. The inaugural service was operated using an Airbus A330, and the aircraft was ceremonially welcomed with a water salute upon arrival at the Katunayake Airport. Capital Airlines flight JD 487 touched down at 1:46 p.m. carrying 170 passengers and 13 crew. Under the new schedule, Capital Airlines will operate flights to Katunayake twice weekly, arriving every Tuesday and Saturday at 2:20 p.m. with return departures at Beijing scheduled for 4:20 p.m. on the same days. The flight duration is approximately 8 hours. The inaugural arrival was attended by the Chinese Deputy Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Head of Airport Management at Katunayake Airport, alongside several other guests. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the United Nations faces imminent financial collapse amid unpaid annual dues, among other issues. In a letter addressed to all UN member states, he urged the members to agree to overhaul the UN's financial rules or accept the financial collapse of the organization, calling on them to pay their annual dues. Guterres said that there was a record $1.57 billion in outstanding dues by the end of 2025. While Guterres did not blame a specific country for the UN's financial troubles, his appeal comes as United States President Donald Trump has moved to slash Washington's funding for multilateral institutions. The US accounts for 22% of the core budget, followed by China. In early January, the UN approved a $3.45 billion budget for 2026, down 7% from last year. Still, Guterres warned that the organization could run out of cash by July. As of Thursday, only 36 of the 193 UN member states had fully paid their regular 2026 contributions, according to the UN website. That's all for tonight from First at 9. For the latest updates around the clock, stay in touch with Ada Derana, the Sri Lanka's news brand of international excellence. Thank you for joining. Have a great night.